Hello, hello. My name is Dr. Yetsitwakli Wosunu, and it's a pleasure for me today to present to you this lecture called Guidelines for Prescribing Physical Activity for Persons with Disabilities. I'm a member of the ISPRM Physical Activity for Persons with Disabilities Task Force, and you'll notice the first thing you'll see in the title is that I've put the word guidelines in quotes. And I did that for a reason, so just keep it in mind. I'll move myself out of the way and then continue to share my slides. Okay, so in this lecture, I'm going to discuss 4 things. The first is asking and answering the question, are a single set of guidelines feasible across contexts? And this first point is really getting into how culture influences our sense of self, our community activities, and the way we solve problems, like the problem of inactivity. Secondly, I'll describe why physical activity, movement, and play matters for persons with disabilities, and this will just be a review of the data-driven physical activity mandates and aspirations from all around the world of sports and the world of recreation. Number 3, I will describe what I think is an exceptional intervention that was designed by Professor Sean Tweedy in Australia. It was designed as a swimming intervention for youth with cerebral palsy and high support needs. I'll discuss the rationale, the aims, the methodology, and some key proof of concept findings that I think deliver an emerging set of principles for prescribing physical activity for persons with disabilities. And then finally, I will describe to you a forthcoming PhD project that is called Voices for Inclusive Activity. This is pioneering work by Beverly Goodman. She is soon to be Dr. Beverly Goodman at the University of Essex. And this work essentially emphasizes the importance of bespoke, fit for purpose, and contextualized monitoring and evaluation tools. So first, answering the question, are a single set of guidelines for prescribing physical activity for persons with disabilities feasible across different geographical and cultural contexts? Well, just consider this. There are 6 stages of individual behavior change, right? And that includes something like going from being inactive to being active. Stage 2 is a critical inflection point, and it's called contemplative. In this stage, people start to think about the issue and the possible need to make some changes, like becoming physically active. They recognize there's a problem and that they can better solve the problem by doing something about it to improve their lives. There may have been a trigger event, like an older friend or neighbor having had a bad fall or passing away, or there may be some other form of prompt that starts the process of considering change. The question I ask when I see this kind of general principle is that which prompts matter to whom and in which cultures? In the same way that 80% of the world's health outcomes are caused by social determinants of health, cultural context plays an outsized role in the way we think about ourselves, our roles, our health, and our decisions. And so this is what I would just like you to consider as we kind of move through this presentation. So some great perception research was done back in 2005, and the group has continued the research through until present day. It's been done in different parts of the world. But the original work, which was done by a group listed there at the bottom, took 36 pictures with a single foregrounded object, like an animal or a non-living entity, think like an airplane or something like that. And they placed that foregrounded object on a realistic background, a naturalistic background. 36 images with an object that was foregrounded in a naturalistic background were presented to research participants. When confronted with these naturalistic scenes, Westerners tended to focus more on the foregrounded object, while Easterners focused more on the background. These and many other studies since, right up into 2024, as you can see down in the bottom there, have shown that when comparing collectivist societies to individualistic societies, our social orientation, or what we focus on, spills over into some very fundamental aspects of our reasoning, including how we approach problems. Um, Interestingly enough, people in more collectivist societies tend to be more holistic in the way they think about problems, more connected, more communal, focusing on relationships and the context of the situation, while people in more individualistic societies tend to focus on separate elements, to see individuals as having inflated capacities and capabilities, and also to consider situations as being fixed and unchanging. So this very different mindset from collectivist versus more individualistic societies has been demonstrated again and again in research since 2005. And if it's true that Westerners tend to attend to more individual focal objects and people rather than contextual information and vice versa, then maybe our messaging and strategies related to physical activities must be integrated into these cultural differences in the way we think. It's very important that we understand that there are cultural differences in both viewing patterns and perceptions. And we should ask ourselves the question, how can these pretty substantial cultural differences influence our physical activity strategies? And most importantly, especially for those who are doing the physical activity, the enjoyment of those physical activity strategies. That being said, because I think the answer to the question, can a single set of guidelines be relevant across contexts? Probably is no. There have to be some adaptabilities and some eventualities considered, particularly when it comes to the differences in cultural perception. So I think principles are probably stronger approach than guidelines. And so over the next couple of minutes, I'll be describing the rest of the talk, and we will coalesce on a set of 6 principles for prescribing physical activity for persons with disabilities. Okay, coming to the second point, why physical activity, movement, and play matters for persons with disabilities. Here are some data-driven mandates and aspirations from around the world. So the number we all know and love is 1 billion, as the World Health Organization and others estimate. Greater than 1 billion persons live with some form of disability around the world. For every 1 person who dies in a disaster, 3 are left with a permanent disability or injury. In addition, over 3.5 million refugees and those internally displaced survive with disabilities. Further, 4 out of 5 disabled people live in low to middle income countries. So that's the other number we should all know and love. 4 out of 5, or 80% of the world's disabled population lives in low to middle income countries. Again, thinking about cultural context, I think that's important just to have as a point of reference. So, as you know, the 2006 Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities promotes the full and equal enjoyment of all human freedoms by persons with disabilities, as well as general respect for inherent dignity. Of particular interest to us as a group focused on physical activity is Article 30, which says participation in cultural life, recreation, leisure, and sport are a fundamental right of all persons with disabilities. I just added in a little carrot there, that it's not just that we want people to participate in recreation, leisure, and sport, but we also want them to enjoy it. And so when you think about the kinds of sports, the kind of physical activity, and the kind of play environments we are suggesting our patients and even our family members and community members get engaged with, we do want them to have a resonance with those play, movement, and sport environments and enjoy what we're asking them to physically do. So, of course, one solution to the need for participation in cultural life, recreation, leisure, and sport is adaptive, para, and Paralympic sports. The Paralympic sports movement in particular is focused on goal setting, performance, and outcomes, right? Whereas adaptive sport, para, and just movement is really more focused on physical exertion. Um, Paralympic movement itself also aims to reduce disability stigma, transform attitudes, and drive inclusion. But it's a competitive arena where standards and expectations are an inherent and uncompromising part of the landscape. Um, with all physical activity, movement, recreation, and play, physical exertion is part of the deal. But specifically with sport, and this will come up a little bit later, the idea of skill acquisition and the idea of goal setting is really inherent. The many benefits of adaptive para and Paralympic sport have been very well described, and these benefits include mental benefits, for example, increased mood, improved sense of life purpose, increased or enhanced self-acceptance, autonomy and independence. There are some physical benefits, of course, um, escalating energy, physical wellness, strength, and bone health. And then, of course, there are social or connectivity benefits where interpersonal relationships are enhanced. Caregiver needs are also improved, partly due to the unique features of the environment. So I'm just going to dive now into the swimming intervention for youth with CP and high support needs. I think this is a great example of a case study that emphasizes some of the principles of prescribing physical activity or movement or play or sport to persons with disabilities. So let's start with the rationale, aims, and methodology. So this study, sort of as an overarching theme, really aimed to demonstrate the fact that parasport can or could be used as medicine. More formally, the study's aim was to evaluate the effect of a performance-focused swimming program on motor function in previously untrained adolescents with cerebral palsy and high support needs, and to determine whether or not the motor decline typical of adolescents with cerebral palsy and high support needs occurred in these novice swimmers. So the paper itself was published in the British Journal of Sports Medicine very recently. And as I mentioned, the senior author's name is Sean Tweedy, down in Australia. So here were some of their methods. A multiple baseline, single case experimental design was used. It comprised 5 phases, and it started in March of 2017. Just as a methodological point of interest, this MBSCED, or multiple baseline single case experimental design, is really interesting. It is equivalent to a randomized controlled trial in that causality can be established through this methodology, and each participant is used as his or her own internal control. So it's a pretty nifty methodological approach. It gives you pretty powerful outcomes, and it gives you the ability to, similar to our RCT, create causal links, which is a very important in this space when you're evaluating the strength of your intervention. As I mentioned, there was a 30-month follow-up. In this case, participants were 2 males and 1 female, all aged 15 years, and they were untrained with CP, HSN, or cerebral palsy and high support needs. The intervention itself was a 46-month swimming training program focused exclusively on improving performance. Outcomes were listed on the left there of your screen. Swim performance, oh, sorry, 1 second. Yeah, swim performance, i.e. velocity, training load, by rating of perceived exertion, minutes per week, swim distance per week, and then gross motor function measure. That was a 66 item set, or a GM FM 66. The data were analyzed using interrupted time series simulation analysis, and then the motor function over 46 months was modeled using GM-FM-66 scores and compared with the model of predicted motor decline, and that was based on population level data. The main goals of this training program were performance improvement, and that's really an important part of this intervention, okay? It wasn't about um, um, necessarily about just participating or just showing up, etc. It really was about improving and getting measurably better over the course of the intervention. This was articulated to the participants, which you'll hear about in a moment when we play the video. But more importantly to that, the training aimed to achieve three main sub goals outside of performance improvement, and they were: number one, improved water safety skills; number two, minimized hydrodynamic drag forces; and then number three, maximized propulsive forces. Training was delivered by a multi-professional team in the background. And this team comprised of qualified physical therapists or physiotherapists, exercise physiologists, and swim coaches. And this team was then supported by a multi-professional medical team, including Dr. Sean Tweedy. So training session frequency increased from once per week to 5 times per week as the training phases progressed. So shown on your screen to the left is 4 phases, but actually this was a 5-phase intervention. We just ran out of space to add that 5th phase on the slide. Training session intensity and duration varied, but it definitely aimed to gradually increase over time. Again, this is a performance-focused, performance improvement sports environment. So data from the full 46 months, and that comprises the 16-month MBSCED, and then the 30-month follow-up, the 16-month multiple baseline single control trial, and then the 30-month follow-up. Data provided a basis for comparing participant motor function with predicted motor decline, again at the population level. And there were really just 2 main findings that emerged from these data. The first is that there was found to be a causal relationship between the swimming and function, right? And the second is that motor decline was not only prevented, but improved. So unpacking those just a little bit. A performance-focused swimming training program, right, which this was, delivered by a skilled multi-professional team and comprising training volumes that were commensurate with WHO physical activity recommendations, improved motor function in a previously untrained group of youth with CP and high support needs. Importantly, in all participants, motor function improved following training phases, but importantly, motor function declined following withdrawal phases, indicating causality. Second point there is that these improvements occurred during a life stage when population-based modeling indicates that motor function typically should decline. Therefore, people with CP at GM-FCS level 4 who achieve training volumes commensurate with WHO physical activity guidelines during adolescence can not only maintain but improve their motor function. That's very important because motor decline in this population is in some, according to population level data, considered to be inevitable. And the idea that potentially this type of intervention, which is performance-based, which is oriented towards physical improvements, articulated physical improvements, can potentially actually buck that trend. So I felt that this was a very powerful finding of the study. So I'm just going to highlight a few of what I think are some of the great features of this work. These features give rise to the principles that we'll coalesce on at the end of the talk. So the first is, this was a performance-focused intervention. Recreation, sport, physical activity, movement, play, all of the above, all of them asking if a person with a disability or without to use skeletal muscle to achieve some kind of a goal, I think can come in multiple shapes, forms, and fashions. This study really emphasized performance. So there were standards, there were expectations, there was an expectation that improvement would be not only expected, but measured and tracked gradually over time. And I think this was a very unique and potentially instructive feature of the study, of the intervention. The second was that a multi-professional team was activated. It's all well and good to have a wonderfully well-intentioned and well-trained, highly skilled physiatrist, but alongside them, as this study has suggested, should and could be physiotherapists, coaches, strength and conditioning experts and specialists who can together combine their skills to create a pretty comprehensive program for participants. So the emphasis on multi-professional teams certainly resonates with what we do in physical medicine and rehabilitation. But the fact that this was a holistic multi-professional team activated in the service of these three participants, I thought was a very important feature of this swimming intervention. The third feature that stood out to me was the life stage that was chosen. So all of us go through various transitions. And I think when we do have population-based modeling for various types of disabilities, not just cerebral palsy with high support needs, but also with other types of disabilities, spinal cord injury, brain injury, developmental and other intellectual disabilities, etc. I think it's useful to have the population-based data to intentionally select which phase of life we are choosing to prescribe our physical activity intervention. Not only should we select the stage, but we should consider the patient's life stage or the participant's life stage and determine, based on their life stage, are they an adolescent? Are they a young adult? Are they a midlife adult? Are they an older adult? How can we tailor the intervention accordingly? So the fact that the life stage was taken into consideration and that population level data was considered, I thought was a great feature of the study. The final point I just want to make is that the training volumes were commensurate with the World Health Organization physical activity recommendations during adolescence. Not wanting to reinvent the wheel, the authors of this study took what the WHO has already articulated to us as a global population and repackaged it as a sport intervention, which I thought was a brilliant idea. So yes, these physical activity recommendations exist for various stages of life. I think we don't need to look much farther than them when we are thinking about how to prescribe physical activity for our disabled participants / patients. This was, in my view, an efficiency strategy, right? But also, it just shows that you can use those recommendations and repackage them, reframe them in any way that makes sense to you and to the patients or participants sitting in front of you. But again, you don't need to reinvent wheels and come up with training volumes that don't necessarily align with what's already been recommended globally. Of course, if this is a more of a high performance sport environment, then that point goes out the window. But these are some of the principles of this study that I felt were worth highlighting and thinking about when you are prescribing physical activity for persons with disabilities, either in your clinic or in your community or in your family. So let's just watch. If this video plays, I'll be very excited. Yes, it will. Here we go.
The name ParaStart does a lot of work for us. At first instance, para tells you that it's athletes who are eligible to compete in Paralympic sport. And START is an acronym. It stands for Sports, Training and Research Team.
When I started, I couldn't swim at all. Being able to swim a 50-meter distance safely And independently, I think that was one of my greatest achievements.
The focus of our Parastart program is to evaluate the therapeutic benefits of sport for people with disabilities. So taking people with high support needs and training them, whether that be in swimming or frame running, and seeing the therapeutic benefits.
Let's see if I can
Has on their life.
pull this up another way.
The name Parastart does a lot of work.
Just give me a second. I'm going to see if I can pull this up another way. I'm going to start the video again. Sorry for the delay.
Name Parastart does a lot of work for us. At first instance, para tells you that it's athletes who are eligible to compete in Paralympic sport. And START is an acronym. It stands for Sports, Training and Research Team.
When I started, I couldn't swim at all. Being able to swim a 50-meter distance safely and independently, I think that was one of my greatest achievements.
The focus of our Parastart program is to evaluate the therapeutic benefits of sport for people with disabilities. So taking people with high support needs and training them, whether that be in swimming or frame running, and seeing the therapeutic benefits that has on their life as a whole.
The reason we began the Parastart program was because we were in contact with a lot of athletes who were participating in parasport from grassroots all the way to the elite level. And a really common story was emerging. They were telling us that they were getting much fitter and stronger. That was really self-evident, but that they were able to function better, and they had these great avenues for developing social connections, and they felt better about themselves through their involvement in sport. We wanted to put some science behind it to investigate the veracity of the information they were giving us.
We've seen huge changes in our athletes' behaviour, independence, even their function. So what we would tend to see with adolescents with cerebral palsy is their function tends to decline over their adolescent years. And we've actually seen across the swimming program that their function has maintained and improved. So the opposite of what we would normally expect to see. Their social engagement has also really improved. The way that they can communicate and work together is much better now than it was when they first started.
Now I can finally relate to those kids I had growing up who had these 5 a.m. wake up sessions every day. They would go to the pool, they would talk about their training, what they're doing. And now, yes, I'm an adult, but I can finally feel that same energy, and I can finally have that same experience.
And the population we really focus on are people who are not only eligible for Paralympic sport, but who have high support needs. So they're the athletes who use wheeled mobility, and they need personal support for fundamental tasks of daily living. One of the things that they appreciate about the way that our team works with them is that we have expectations. If they're not working hard enough, they'll be told. They appreciate being held to a standard and to try to be extended and pushed. We've been incredibly gratified with the public support that we've received. We want to expand this program. We want to look at people with a range of diagnoses to see whether the results that we're finding in the athletes that we've got so far can be generalised. We also want to try in a range of different sports. We've got visions for expanding that, and to do that, we'll be really depending on support from not only research grants, but from the public as well.
The main difference for our Parastart program compared to other disability programs is that we are investigating sports training and high performance sport. So we do training sessions rather than therapy sessions. We are coaches rather than clinicians. We have a squad, so a team that's all working on sport rather than a clinic setting, and it's much less rehabilitation and much more sports training.
Getting people with high support needs to be more physically active and achieve goals is a wonderful aim. But for us, we're at a university, it's absolutely critically important that we're underpinning that with research. We're documenting everything that we do, all the changes that take place, because it's that that's going to really allow us to publish in the scientific literature, but eventually to change practice as well.
So the information of the program is up there on the screen. Please take note of it and feel free to reach out to the group. Professor Tweedy is well known to all of us at the Paralympic movement and within multiple physical medicine rehabilitation societies. I'm going to stop my share just for a moment to get us back on track with the slides, just because I'm not sure how to both play the videos and keep this recording going. So bear with me for just a few moments now. I'll come back to my slides on Zoom. So hopefully you can see my slides once again. Bigger, there we go. Okay, coming now to the sort of final project that I would like to put in front of you. This section of the talk reviews the Voices for Inclusive Activity, which is the work of Beverly Goodman. She's a PhD candidate and therefore Dr. Goodman to be. And what she emphasizes in the project is the importance of fit for purpose monitoring and evaluation. So this first slide is another video. I'm not sure if it's going to play. Let's see if it does.
Hello and welcome to the first podcast episode from Voices for Inclusive Activity.
Okay, it does play, but you're unable to see the video. So what I'll do is just move forward and then come to the video at the very end of the presentation. So the problem that Beverly and her team are identified is that existing tools that are used to evaluate disabled people's participation in sports, movements, and play are typically inaccessible, and they do not include a variety of ways and means of participation. As a result of that, sport and physical activity programs struggle to demonstrate impact. And the demonstration of impact is what ensures their sustainability and continued funding, et cetera. So the fact that the tools are inaccessible can perpetuate inequalities in access to sport and access to physical activity for disabled people. As we saw, that's a violation of human rights, and that perpetuates injustice. Injustice is also apparent within traditional research approaches that produce knowledge about people with disabilities rather than in collaboration with people with disabilities. And so on the next slide, I just show some of the tools that Bev and her team identified. So at the top there is an extract from the Short Active Lives survey. And as you can see, one of the questions is, in the past 7 days, have you done a continuous walk lasting at least 10 minutes? Check yes or check no. But of course, if you're non-ambulant, the question is irrelevant and non-applicable. Next, look at this question from the IPAC, the International Physical Activity Questionnaire. The question is, now, thinking about the amount of time you spent sitting in the last 7 days, includes time spent at work, at home, while doing coursework, and during leisure time. This may include time spent sitting at a desk, visiting friends, reading, or sitting or lying down to watch television. Well, if you're habitually seated rather than habitually ambulant, again, the question is not applicable or relevant to your situation. So on the right there of the screen, Beverly and her team just shared some images of the various participants. And then Bev has articulated in the center of the slide the two central issues of what she calls occupational injustice. She's an occupational therapist. The first is inequalities in access to sport and physical activity for disabled people, which we all know about in this room. And the second is research approaches producing knowledge about, but rather not with, disabled people. So her research approach to address these problems is to develop what she calls the Voices for Inclusive Activity Project. And I just want to say that I came across this project not very long ago, just about half a month ago. And I was so excited about it that I asked Bev if I could include her work in this presentation for you. And she hasn't yet graduated as a PhD yet, but she very graciously said, you can include what I have, which is our approach, the rationale, etc. And that's what I'm going to be presenting today. So Bev, in her wisdom, coordinates this project with 7 co-researchers. That includes 5 disabled people and 1 family carer. They work together and genuinely together to explore more accessible and inclusive ways of evaluating and measuring disabled people's participation in sport and physical activity. Researchers, again, they're all sort of equal and egalitarian in their approach, used principles of co-production to design and implement the project. 2 categories of participants were funders and providers of sport and physical activity, and then users and non-users of sport and physical activity for persons with disabilities. Co-production is a very interesting concept. I'd encourage you to look it up. Co-production has a few different definitions, but essentially it rests on the principle of nothing about us without us, where research, quote, subjects are pulled in right from the start of a research project and collaborated with in an equitable way on the question, the methodology, the research project itself, and then the dissemination of the results. So it really is start to finish an equitable approach to doing scientific work. This is Beverly's team. Her co-researchers are Tom, Fiona, Karen, Vanessa, Ryan, and Mike. She has a wonderful group of supervisors at the University of Essex, Dr. Freeman, Dr. Speed, and Dr. Petition, as well as Dr. Gladwell. And the outcomes of her study are forthcoming. So she just emphasizes, watch this space. Please, you can find her at b.goodman@ss.ac.uk. And then they also have a YouTube channel, Voices for Inclusive Activity. So I'm going to stop my share again and take you to that channel now so that you can meet the researchers. Bear with me as I transition. There we go. Thank you for your patience, everyone. Okay, so this is the introduction to the research team. There you go, should be able to see it now.
Hello and welcome to the first podcast episode from Voices for Inclusive Activity. We are a group of disabled co-researchers who have lived experience and a vested interest in making sport and physical activity accessible for all. The project is facilitated by Bev Goodman, who is an occupational therapist and a PhD student at the University of Essex in the UK. Just before we get started, please note that this recording is available as an audio podcast, a video via YouTube, including subtitles, and as a written transcript. So let's meet the team. My name is Vanessa Wallace, and I am a Paralympian who is known for chucking heavy metal balls and occasionally a metal spear. I have a couple of conditions one called EDS and one called dystonia, and I'm now a full-time wheelchair user. Now we are going to pass across to Fiona.
Thank you, Nessa, for that lovely introduction. My name is Fiona and I'm a former para-athlete who competed in the sprinting events 100, 200 and 400 metres and also enjoyed discus as well. My disability is cerebral palsy and it mainly affects both of my legs, so I'm a diplegic, although there are some tonal issues within my arms as well. I am an ambulant person, which means I walk and I can take on daily activities independently, which is really good. My main job is a primary school teacher at an outstanding primary school on the Hearts Beds border, which I absolutely love. And outside of work, I enjoy doing projects such as this one to raise awareness of the importance of disability sport. It's been a pleasure to work with such an inspiring and wonderful group of people, and I look forward to sharing some of our experiences with you very soon.
Thank you, Fiona. I'm now going to pass over to Tom.
Thank you, Nessa. So yeah, my name's Tom, and so my involvement in sport is I'm a wheelchair rugby player, not at the level of the other two people talking, but I'd still managed to enjoy my participation. I was involved in setting up Saracens Wheelchair Rugby Club, which train in Hatfield, and I'm now the chairman of the club. Outside of wheelchair rugby, I have a wider interest in disability participation in sport and physical activity. I'm working for the Heart Sports Partnership, where I lead on our disability work. I recently undertook a degree apprenticeship where I studied business management alongside working at the Heart Sports Partnership. So working on this project was really timely to find out about research and be involved in that process. I have a spinal cord injury, which I obtained after I had an injury playing rugby in 2010. I'm a tetraplegic and a full-time wheelchair user.
Thank you, Tom. I'm now going to pass across to Bev.
Hi everyone, I'm Bev. I'm not a disabled person, but the Voices for Inclusive Activity project started as part of my PhD research. So working together as co-researchers, we're exploring more accessible and inclusive ways of evaluating disabled people's participation in sport and physical activity. The project came from the recognition that some disability sport and physical activity providers were struggling to use existing evaluation tools as they were inaccessible and not inclusive. And the risk of this is that activities can't demonstrate their value and worth, which leads to problems with ongoing funding and sustainability.
Thank you, Bev. I also wanted to add in that we have a rather fabulous lady called Karen and an even more fantastic person called Ryan and his dad Mike, who are part of our group but couldn't be with us for our recording today. I also forgot to add in that I'm a student at the University of East London, so go UEL. Now, throughout our episodes, we will share our journey from the early stages of our first meeting, where we discussed our aims, our targets, and a distinct lack of cake and a whole lot more, to planning and carrying out our research. At a later date, we will look forward to discussing and evaluating our findings and making some recommendations for the future. So that's just a little taster from us today. Thanks everyone for listening. Tune in for our second episode, which will have far more detail about our project and what we have managed to get up to so far. I'm going to ask everyone to do a really cheesy thing and wave at the camera as we just say goodbye. Bye.
And there they are. All right, stopping my share, coming back, last couple of slides. Thank you for your patience. There we go. All right. There we are. All right. Last couple of slides here. Where are we? There we are. Okay. Again, watch this space. Some of their outcomes will be on their YouTube channel soon, just so you can write it down again. Voices for Inclusive Activity. You can check out the YouTube channel, subscribe, etc. So here's some emerging principles that I think these two fabulous projects have surfaced. The first is, there are 70 adaptive sports out there, 28 Paralympic sports, but 70 adaptive sports on offer all around the world in various corners of the globe. And so when you're prescribing physical activity or sport or play or movement to persons with disabilities, be they your patients, community members, family members, or other, I think it's important to focus on these principles based on the two studies that I found very inspiring and useful. First, if at all possible, I think a performance focus, even if it's low-lying outcomes, can be very useful. It's nice to have a galvanizing effect, and nice to have a sort of magnetism to the physical activity, movement, and play. If the performance-focused outcome is just to have fun, if it's to participate daily, weekly, twice a week, once a month, whatever it is, I think if you can articulate the focus of the performance, then it helps keep those participants motivated. As you saw in the video from the University of Queensland, the standards and the expectations that were involved in the swimming intervention were really motivating and well appreciated by these 15-year-olds who said, I can finally relate to these high-performing athletes who sacrifice and wake up so early in the morning to participate. There's a certain cachet and a certain sense of deep accomplishment and satisfaction associated with performance focus, as well as performance achievements. The second principle that I think emerges from these two cases is the importance of, where possible, activating a multi-professional team for support, not just for support of the participant, but for support of the prescriber. We don't know what we don't know, and all of our incredible amounts of training sometimes doesn't overlap with other professionals' training. And so bringing together a team of physiotherapists, psychologists, strength and conditioning professionals, coaches, can be really useful in making sure that the participant is well taken care of and that all boxes have been checked, all I's dotted, all T's crossed when designing the intervention. The third principle that emerges is the importance of articulating and considering the participant's life stage. Where available, population-based models and data can be useful in thinking through the eventualities of that life stage, and then, particularly when you are trying to monitor and evaluate your program, comparing some of the data that you get out of your program with that of population-based data could also be very useful. In the case of the University of Queensland team, they're able to show that their intervention bucked the trend of what data has shown all around the world, and that could be very powerful in articulating the value of their program and ensuring its continued sustainability. The third principle that emerges is the importance of using global guidelines for physical activity participation at various stages of life when deciding on the training volume. The swimming intervention used WHO guidelines, and that was great. They were reframed and repackaged as a performance-focused sports intervention, but the training volumes were commensurate with what's out there in the general world guidelines. So use them, they're your friend. The fifth principle was the importance of measuring success using appropriate tools, and that comes from Bev Goodman's research. So a lot of the physical activity intervention outcome measurements may not be adapted to suit our populations of interest. And so where feasible, adapt the tools, and where possible, try to create your own, kind of like what Bev's doing. And then finally, the sixth principle, we'll just sort of end where we started, is the fact that context and culture really matter. So just think back to the first slide that I showed you during this presentation, and remember what we discussed about cultural perceptions, reasoning, and fundamental problem-solving systems that emerge from those cultural perceptions. Question I would leave you with, if you know that in more collectivist versus individualistic societies, different ways of thinking are prominent, how would you modify the two interventions that we discussed in more collectivist societies? Will we still choose an individual sport like swimming? Would you choose a team sport? Would you find a way to improve the community and family, or involve and integrate the community and family, or leave it to the professionals? Would you tie performance outcomes to community outcomes, or would you tie performance outcomes to family outcomes, to relationship or relational outcomes in some way, literally or figuratively? So just understanding that we all have very specific worldviews, and that worldview does impact our perception, it impacts our reasoning, and it impacts our fundamental problem-solving mechanisms, including how or when to become physically active if inactivity is the problem. And so knowing this, try to design fit for purpose, culturally appropriate, and culturally contextual physical activity and sport, play, and movement interventions for the persons with disabilities in your personal and professional spaces. So with that, I will end. Thank you for your kind attention. I hope you enjoy the rest of the workshop. I'm sure it's going to be great, and I look forward to a very rich discussion. Thank you.